As you may be aware, there have been a lot of mass shootings happening in this country. The question that I think is on everybody's or everyone's mind is why? Why are we having the number of mass shootings that we're having? I can remember all the way back in the 90s when we had Columbine. It really doesn't seem like it has ever slowed down or stopped. One of the things that I would suggest that people do is to look at the history of the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment says that a well-regulated militia should have the right to keep and bear arms. That doesn't necessarily apply to individuals' rights to keep and bear arms. And what many people may be surprised to learn is that that individual right to keep and bear arms was not extended to individuals until the year 2008. The Second Amendment was a part of the Bill of Rights, which protected individuals' freedoms, but again, the Second Amendment was really thought to only apply to a well-regulated militia. It was ratified in 1791. So you have 1791 to 1891, and no interpretation by the U.S. Supreme Court that extended the Second Amendment to individuals. So that's 100 years. Then 1891 to 1991 is 200 years. So 220 odd years later is when you have the case of DC versus Heller, which is the United States Supreme Court case that did interpret the Second Amendment to apply to individual rights. That was the first time that the U.S. Supreme Court had ever taken a close examination of the Second Amendment, and absolutely the first time that it ever extended those rights to individuals' rights to keep and bear arms, more than 200 years after the Second Amendment was ratified. 80% of Americans want some type of regulation when it comes to gun control in this country. Unfortunately, even with 80% of the population wanting some type of regulation with gun control, it still doesn't seem to be happening in this country. And so then the next thing you have to ask yourself is why? So we have this court decision, this judicial decision from the U.S. Supreme Court in 2008, but it's still happening, and there doesn't seem to be any regulation, even though 80% of the country is for some form of regulation. So then it's probably the lobbyists. The NRA and other organizations like the NRA spend gobs and gobs of money on keeping the Second Amendment intact without any regulations. And so that's where we are today, that those organizations are still funneling lots of money to politicians. And politicians obviously want to adhere to the people and the organizations that are giving them the most money. So the final piece, the final question is, what can we do? I'm going to just say that it's not going to be easy. There isn't a quick fix, but what I will say is that there are ways that we can put in safeguards into our legislation to reduce gun violence, hopefully, including background checks, which again, 80% of the country supports. And also, we really have to make sure that our voice is being heard in Congress. Our politicians, the people that represent us in the Senate and in the House of Representatives. And that can be a difficult task to get our voice above and beyond the organizations like the NRA, which are contributing so much money. What I would ask everyone to do is don't think that you don't have a voice. You do have a voice. You should call and write your politicians. Let them know how you feel about this issue and any issue. Because otherwise it will always be the organizations that have money that are contributing the most that will always be heard. If we don't do something, inaction will obviously not get us where we need to be. We need to be proactive in addressing this situation and hopefully having our voice heard by the people that represent us in Congress.